Every single person, regardless of your role, need to know how to sell your ideas is one thing that I cannot stress enough, right? That's true for everybody, but especially for developers, especially for most people in tech. As tech keeps evolving with AI, for example, you just have to learn. Like, I can't even imagine at this point any developer not having some sort of touch point with AI, right? The best
Teaching
way
is the best way
Yeah.
to learn. That's what I've also come across recently.
I think cloud is such a big space that there's opportunity for jobs.
Google and Microsoft, since you've extensively worked in Google and now working at Microsoft,
Exploring different things is always a good thing to do.
AI is going to boost productivity for developers. And we have also seen the articles where we say AI is going to make some aspect of this role redundant down the line. So I want to understand what's your take on this.
AI is always going to be as good as the data that we are providing it to be, right? Would you not use Google search even though it was available? Would you go try and find websites? No, right? But every single developer has to be an AI application creator.
Why do you think personal branding is important for someone in tech, and what impact does it have on an average career trajectory?
I hear from people when they tell me that, oh, my manager says I need more visibility. People don't have relationship with 2 levels up. I think that's insane. Find a way.
Hi everyone, welcome to Bits, Bots and Bosses. I am Akshita Goel, and I recently started this channel Bits, Bots and Bosses, wherein we dive into the world of tech, corporate strategies, leadership and management styles and theories. But we also invite industry experts to our channel to share their insider knowledge. And as part of this effort, we are going to start this podcast series. And I'm very excited about today's episode. And I'll tell you why. We are going to discuss some very unique but crucial topics for your career. For example, personal branding. We don't talk about personal branding that often, right? But by the end of this episode, you will understand why is it so important. And that's just the beginning of it. We have a lot of topics planned for today. For example, future of AI, cloud, and how to build your career in tech giants like Google and Microsoft. All of this just packed into one session. We are in San Francisco meeting one of the best industry leader, Priyanka Vergadia, who would share knowledge on all of these topics coming straight from the wealth of experience that she has. Priyanka has worked for 7 years at Google, going from customer engineer to leading developer relations. She is currently working as senior director for developer engagement strategy at Microsoft, and she's also a member of board of advisors for cloud computing at University of Pennsylvania. And on top of all of that, she's also a best-selling author. So I can't wait to get this started. Let's dive right into it and hear from her. Hi Priyanka, how are you today?
I am great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And after that amazing introduction, let's see if I can answer all of your questions.
No,
But I'm
I'm
very
sure you
excited to be
could.
with you.
All right. Thank you. Let's get started by learning about your journey. Tell us about your journey and what were the key moments in your life that shaped your, path to where you are today.
It's so I did a video a few years ago
Mm-hmm.
where we talked about all the different life moments that shape up who you become, right?
Yeah.
And we don't look at those moments as, that's what it's leading up to, but looking backwards, you can connect all those
Yeah.
dots. So, grew up with in Indian household with parents in India. I'm from central part of India. People who know Indore, that's where I'm from. And my dad and my entire dad's side of family are engineers, and my mom's side of family are all creative people.
Oh.
So I get my creativity from my mom and my engineering skills and the desire to be an engineer early on from my dad. And my dad was a mechanical engineer. So growing up, we were looking at how trains and engines and all of that work, and I was always fascinated by how computers and as we were growing
Yeah.
up, right, how computers work and things like that. So I got into electronics, learned a lot about making chips and things like like that as I grew up, and then I wanted to do computer science. So that's when I came to the U.S. and did my master's.
Yeah.
And from there, I get really I'll fast forward that journey. Wanted to be a software engineer because once you do computer science masters, that's what you want to be, right? And then after one and a half year of being, so my first job was software engineer in test. So I was writing lots of like Selenium tests and
Yeah.
things like that to a large scale testing large scale phone systems.
Okay.
And then a year and a half in, I was working at a startup at that time, and I realized I like what I do, but I wanted to do something else. It wasn't that exciting. So I started looking at people around me, and they were in sales, like technology sales, right?
Yeah.
Tech sales and consultants, basically. And I was like, maybe I should try that. And I'm an extreme introvert. So this is that inflection point that you were talking about, where it's like, okay, I always wanted to be a software engineer, but then you come across something and some triggers in your life where it's like, I'm looking at people and I find that this role could be extremely challenging for me because
Yeah.
I'm an introvert. I've
Yeah.
never presented before. I love technology and I can talk about it, but
Right.
but being a good communicator is a huge part of being in sales.
I know.
So that was that inflection point, and I asked for the opportunity, extremely uncomfortable at the time, to get into something that was totally foreign, right? And 3-4 months in, people around me were actually very supportive. They were like, "You'd be amazing at this," and I was like, "I don't know how you're saying that, but let's see." Right? And 3 months in, I had found something
Right.
that I felt I'm really good at. I was great at presenting. I basically stumbled upon this, right? I was
Yeah.
great at presenting. I was great at demystifying technology for business people.
Nice.
And these were all learnings. I was learning about myself. I was
Yeah.
learning how to communicate better, all of that. And so I at that point I realized that I want to do more of this for
Right.
some years,
Right.
right? And so I stayed in solutions engineering, solutions architect roles for a few companies. Worked at Akamai, worked at Intel, all companies that sell products for developers.
Right.
And then the second inflection point was when I joined Google, similar role, customer engineer, worked
Right.
with customers directly. And then during all this time, I'm presenting, I'm learning, but I'm also teaching, right? You're constantly teaching developers in customer conversations. But I'd never created like video type things
Right.
or written blogs.
Right.
So now I got exposed to a team at Google that was creating videos and blogs, and I had ideas that I wanted to
Your
share.
creative part
Yeah.
really kicked in there.
Really kicked in there. And so I was like, you know what, I want to explain. And this started with the Dialogue Flow series. If anybody's watched that, this is in 2017. Chatbots, and Google had just acquired Dialogue Flow at the time. So I was going to customer meetings where I'm making demos for customers, and there are some other teams who want to use these demos.
Right.
And so I have to be present to show these demos to other customers as well.
Correct.
And I was like, this is not a good use of my time. So let me see if I can scale this in a form of a video,
right.
so that they can use it and I don't have to be available.
Yeah.
And that triggered a 20% project in the developer relations team.
All right.
Which is why I think this is another. And then when I did this 20% project, everybody around me, the production people, the people who do the audio and the video, and also the DevRel team, was like, you are great at this.
Yeah.
Right. And that was the second inflection point where
Right.
it's like, okay, I've stumbled upon something that I think that I'm really good at, and I connect with. I love connecting with people, and the way it comes across is like I love teaching and I love learning, and so it kind of falls into that
Everything
pattern
into
of
place,
creating comes together. So anyway, those are the two inflection points, kind of how the career shaped and got me to things that I love doing.
Right, right. No, it's very interesting. You mentioned that you were introvert at one point and then you went to this whole teaching job and then to production business. I think it's like really a good segue to discuss. Like, I want to understand about the developer advocate role. It's very interesting. Like, I think not all of us understand. So if you could explain
Yeah.
what this role entails and how does it impact an average, developer's life on day-to-day basis? Like how could they benefit from this role and things like
Yeah,
that?
developer advocacy is a very less understood role. So the way I define it, and also it's defined very differently in different companies. So um, I personally feel developer advocacy in developer relations is a role that is a glue between your customers, who are your developers who use your platform or
Right.
the product or your services that you create, um, and take their feedback, teach them how to use your things, and then apply that feedback into the second arm, which
Right.
is the product and engineering. So those two pieces is what developer advocacy sort of brings together: the
Got it.
community of developers, how they use your products, train them how to use it, create content to use it, blogs, videos, all those things,
Right.
training materials, and then work with your product and engineering to make your products better.
Got it. Yeah.
There's lots of other aspects to this as well. You'll work with marketing, you'll work with PR for new launches, but all and learning teams that help with certification, creating content, things like that. But those two pieces are the main crux of it. Now,
Got it. Yeah.
depending on which company you work for, that definition could change a little bit. Sometimes these roles sit more in marketing. Sometimes this role sits in engineering and product, which is where
Right.
Google has it. And sometimes this role could also sit in on the sales side of things. So
Got it.
depending on where you sit,
Yeah.
your OKRs would depend or be a little bit different, but that's what it means.
Yeah, I think what I'm loving about this job is it's like multifaceted. You could have a lot of tech into it, then but you also have a lot of marketing and PR. And I feel like at a very basic level, a developer's life does need to have all of these aspects, right? You have to on continuous basis pitch your idea, sell it to product managers, to your engineering managers, and
Yep.
still have to deliver. So that's I think a great
Such a
yeah.
great point. And I
Yeah.
know you will probably come to this later as well, but um, developers of all people, I think, become so much stronger as because they're great at technical skill set,
Right.
right? If you surround yourself, or at least give yourself opportunity to do 20% or volunteer stuff
Yeah.
on marketing teams and sales team, you add so much more to your personal development,
Correct.
as and that we undermine,
Yeah.
because you learn to sell your idea. And I
Yeah.
think every single person, whatever, regardless of your role, need to know how to sell your ideas, need to
Absolutely.
know how to market your ideas,
Correct.
and need to know how to tailor your message when you're talking to marketing person versus when you're talking to an engineering and product lead who's going to give you funding, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's such an important thing.
I think you've given me a perfect segue to my next question, which is like you must have worked with a lot of developers in your career, right? And you've also noticed a lot of journeys along the way. So, what do you think is the aspect of developers' life which is most undermined at the moment, but you think needs the most attention, or what do you think developers focus on? I know they are all working on the tech skills, making it better every day, but what is the other aspect they could really focus on?
I think constantly learning new things is one thing that I cannot stress enough,
Yeah.
right? That's true for everybody, but especially for developers, especially for most people in tech as well,
Right.
right? Because
Right.
if you just get stuck, like how many times does it happen that you're working on a language, but then there's a new language in the world, and you need to
Yeah.
just get into it as well,
Right.
right? Or language is just one example, but like tech keeps evolving with AI, for
Correct.
example. You
Yeah.
just have to learn. Like, I can't even imagine at this point any developer not having some sort of touch point with AI right now, right?
Absolutely.
So having the ability to constantly learn and to constantly tell yourself that every single day I will read blogs for half an hour, or
That's right.
right,
Yeah.
or I will consume some information, whether it's reading a new research paper,
Absolutely.
or reading a blog, or even the way I continue to do this is I would read something, and then I would also try to explain it.
Right.
And then
That's
that's
right.
the best
Teaching
way.
is the best way
Yeah.
to learn. That's what I've also
Yeah.
come across recently.
Yeah. So that's the one thing I would say. I think all the technical skill set, all of us who are in this space need to constantly be
Yeah.
learning and be open to learning a new thing every day.
Absolutely right, like throughout, because this tech space is just evolving at a speed, like to match or to even just keep up with it, you have to
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah.
That's right. I think since you mentioned about learning, I know that you are very, active in different areas. So a lot of us are also trying like 9 to 5 jobs, and then on part of it is content creation, and then you're trying like other passions, and you also work as you're a faculty leader for cloud computing at University of Pennsylvania. So I want to understand, learn about your passions, but also discuss how did you specifically chose this teaching job outside of your already demanding jobs at
Yeah.
Microsoft.
I think okay, so growing up in India, and this is very close to my heart, okay? I I feel that education
Mhm,
can change people's lives
mhm.
in ways that nothing else can. I think it can solve for abuse. It can solve for women empowerment.
Yeah.
It can solve for hunger.
Mhm,
So, if my passion in life is to really just be able to teach people the
mhm,
skills
mhm,
that they can apply
mhm.
to get better
Yeah.
get better financially, or get better in just being from a student to get a job, or from a job to
Yeah.
get a better job, right?
Mhm,
That is what I believe in.
mhm.
So, teaching is never going to be something that I am willing to just get away from, right?
Right.
It's not even about getting paid. It's
It's
about
one
it's yeah,
little for hard to get that
exactly.
satisfaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when the opportunity for teaching came along at the university, it's like, yes, I would totally do this, and I believe in cloud in the ways that, especially, you can get you. I think cloud is such a big space that
Hmm.
there's opportunity for jobs in.
Right.
There's a lot of opportunity for jobs, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, that's exactly why I took that, and then just my day-to-day job is also very
Yeah.
significantly
It's
about
also
teaching.
related teaching. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it all ties
it
back,
all
right?
ties together. So yeah, the passion, as you were talking about, that is like close to my heart, about teaching and learning new things, and it
Hmm.
kind of solves for both
Right.
in these situations. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think just and adding on to that, how do you like this is what I'm struggling personally. So how do you make sure that what are your go-to things to make sure that you're doing justice to all of these roles? Because it could be
Yeah.
it could be overwhelming like at times, right?
Yeah,
So,
it gets very overwhelming, and
hmm.
I'm also doing school. I'm doing an executive MBA
Oh God.
along with this, so that's over the weekends, and
Hmm.
then I get one weekend where I'm doing my homeworks, and then the other weekend I'm at school. But the best way to balance all this is. Um, I think when you love and you want to do something,
Hmm.
you figure out ways to find time on your
Time.
calendar to do it.
Right.
There are, I also do some mentorship. That the
Hmm.
schedule, my scheduled time for mentorship
Hmm.
is 7 to 9
Okay.
for 4 days in the week. And then, sometimes I get, sometimes those days are free, but most times they are busy,
Taken.
right? So I schedule time aggressively on my calendar for everything I do. So
Gotcha.
my calendar is basically like go to for like, okay, I
Yeah.
even like when I was writing the book, the scheduled time for writing the book is there. So
Right.
it's nobody's
Time
taking that
box it.
away. It's boxed.
Yeah.
I need to have 90 minutes before it starts to become very productive for me, especially when you're writing things like
Of
books.
course. Yeah.
So I would block half a day to do just that. For teaching, for 6 months, were to create the course itself. So it was very much like writing a book.
Of course.
I
Yeah.
was very much like sitting there, and I blocked 2 days off the calendar, and I said I'm going to do two sections or two modules of the course
Right.
back to back,
Right.
sitting for 2 days. So
Yeah.
I really do run my entire life on calendar.
Calendars. So what I'm hearing is really time box it and then stick to it. Then a part of your brain is free to now yeah, focus on the creative part of it
Exactly,
and
because
not
I
just
get
planning.
serious anxiety if things are just in my
Me
brain,
too.
so I have to put them on calendar and be like,
Yeah.
okay, now it's on calendar, it will happen,
Yeah.
or at least I won't forget it. I'll move it
Yeah.
if I need to, but
But
it's
it's
there.
there, so it will get done. It's
Yeah,
part of your to-do
yeah.
list. Awesome. Okay. Now, I want to shift gears and talk about Google and Microsoft since you've extensively worked in Google and now
Mhm.
working at Microsoft. So, what do you think is the unique offerings of these companies? And if someone is planning or aspiring to join, what could they expect in terms of career development, opportunities, and culture from these companies?
Great question. Okay, so I'll maybe first define how they are different.
Right, let's do that.
Google, as I think most people know, is amazing as like it's a product company, product and
Yeah.
engineering focused
Hmm.
company. And it's run mostly like a startup. So
Okay.
most areas in Google would be like you have your own autonomy, you do
Hmm.
whatever you want, you
Yeah.
create the product,
Hmm.
you have passion for it, you
Hmm.
build something.
Hmm.
And Microsoft, on the other hand,
Hmm.
it's been only a few weeks for me to have joined Microsoft, but
Hmm.
what I am finding is they're amazing at the operational aspect. So
Gotcha. Hmm.
the product is great and everything, but then the operational aspects of like how do you go to market effectively? How do you organize your sales teams? How do you organize comp and business processes for those teams? It's something that I am amazed to see
Hmm.
on how it's sort of like a class in scaling and operationalization
Hmm.
is and I'm going through an MBA, so I'm trying to always find
Yeah.
places where it's like, oh, what does that class apply here?
Yeah.
And it does, right? And so the stark difference, startup product engineering focused versus Microsoft more operationally focused and scale focused.
Right.
And I'm just one of those people who loves to learn different things. So
Yeah.
it's great from
Yeah.
that perspective.
And there's also stark difference between both the companies, right? The culture and I think that just the way of working would be really different.
Yeah, yeah. The
Mm.
way of working culture. I think in the Bay Area, though, it's hard to define that because I think both of these companies have amazing work culture. So very hard to distinguish from
Sure.
that from the Bay Area perspective. The other thing I would say is, and I think this is true everywhere, but at Google, the culture of like the 20% projects was something
Yeah.
that I'd taken advantage of
Hmm.
quite a bit. Like I
Hmm.
mentioned earlier, about 20% getting into DevRel,
Hmm.
just gives you a lot of opportunity to explore what you might be great at. And
Right.
sometimes you
Right.
just don't know what you're great at, and you
Absolutely. It
have
takes
to
time to figure out.
you have
Yeah.
to figure out, you have to try a few things and say, yes, it's for me.
Hmm.
The other thing, no, not for me, but I've done it.
Hmm.
I know how that. So I think, and I think both all companies sort of give you these opportunities in
Hmm.
some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Even if they're not officially giving you 20% projects or rotation opportunities,
Hmm.
there's always an opportunity where you can say, hi, I want to learn
Yeah.
a
No one
little
is
bit
going to
about
say no.
marketing.
Yeah.
I would do some volunteer work with you.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
most places you'll be able to find that.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
I want to share something on that. So, I was working for Shell earlier before Amazon, and then I think the similar concept is being followed in different companies, just the names are
Yeah.
different. There used to be day job, night job, and then when I used to go to my manager and say, like, this is what I want to explore, I want to get into blockchain or something else,
Yeah.
and they would be like, yeah, figure out an opportunity, and we are happy to support. So, it's
Exactly.
like really on you how passionate you want to just pursue that opportunity and see if it works for you or not.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
This is exactly what I tell everybody I mentor, that you have to even if you don't want to move a job or change what you're doing,
Right.
exploring different things is always a good thing to do because
Absolutely.
it adds on to the current job that you're doing. It can, like, for
Yeah,
example, a
something you're
developer.
going to come back with, right?
Exactly. You'll
Yeah.
come back with how to communicate better if you work with sales, if you work
Hmm.
with marketing.
Yeah.
You'll understand their points of view, their perspective, and then
Hmm.
you'll be a better developer because of
All
those
of these things.
perspectives.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't always have to be changing a job. That's
Yeah.
why I'm trying something different. It can just be augmenting what you currently do with
Right.
those skill sets.
Yeah, it just gets back added back to what you're
Yeah.
doing. Absolutely. Okay, so I want to now get into the AI. So
Okay.
I've seen a lot of your content on AI, and all of that was very helpful for me to understand and learn about AI. And we've also seen some articles which talks about that AI is going to boost the productivity for developers.
Mhm.
And we've also seen the articles where we say AI is going to make some aspect of this role redundant down the line.
Mhm.
So I want to understand what's your take on this.
Okay. So I think AI is, and this is not a surprise when I say this. AI is going to help improve productivity for every single job role, not just developers,
Yeah.
right? It's very evident and clear. For developers specifically, it's helpful in cases where you do stuff that is redundant, that or
Yeah.
repetitive, and you don't want to sort of be wasting your time doing that. You want to be doing using your time doing more new code, innovative stuff, right?
Yeah.
So things like writing a test case is sort of boring, and that's exactly why the test coverage is always
Yeah.
really
A thing
bad.
to work on.
Right, it's always a backlog thing to
Yeah.
work on.
Yeah.
The other thing that I hear is, and one of my friends has this company called Code Rabbit, where code reviews are also something that takes a lot
A
of
lot of
time,
time.
right?
Yeah.
And it's just taking away from the time that you could be actually writing that new code and
Right.
solving a new function feature or a function. So those are just some examples, but that's kind of that is what makes the developer's life easier with AI.
Right.
Now, I think the stuff around like creating new code generation for and code explanations is also very helpful, but it's all dependent on what data you're offering it to provide
Of
code
course.
recommendations and
Yeah.
code generations and stuff. So as RAG evolves a little further, we are continuing to see that the recommendations are getting better, right? But that's a continuous evolution and would get better. I think there was a second part to that question. What was that?
Uh, so that was about so AI also going to make some aspect of the developer role redundant.
Redundant,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that's going to happen for every single role, in my opinion. I think what we as individuals can do is to try and beat the mediocre.
Yeah. And how
And
do
that
you
is
do
the
that?
and that's the yeah, try and beat the mediocre by constantly learning new things, constantly trying to be better than
Right.
what we were yesterday, right? Because AI is always going to be as good as the data that we are providing it to be,
Correct.
right?
Right.
And that it I think it's as simple as that, and if we strive as humans to be better versions of what we were doing, whether it's skill set, whether it's being a developer, coding, creativity is going to be what's most valued
Right.
over time, because AI, it'll be hard for AI to be as creative as a
Correct.
human.
Just focus on problem solving.
Exactly. Problem solving, creativity, those would be the skills that we would have to focus on. And those who are not working in actively in those skill set would, I think, fall behind. So
Yeah.
we should try to at least add things in our learnings that are more creative, that are more problem solving based.
But all said and done, you do feel that since AI is already there, there's no harm in leveraging this technology to make offload your repetitive tasks, right?
I think it's you're doing yourself a disservice not using these tools that are available to you, because then you're becoming more efficient.
Yeah.
I love to use it for code generation, code explanations. Also love to use it for writing some stuff,
Right.
right? Because you I have great ideas, and I put those down as bullets and put some examples in. I take help from Claude, OpenAI, whatever, right? And get to better versions of what my thought was, or
Yeah.
structure it in ways that are faster.
Right.
So I just personally think you are doing yourself a disservice if you're not using the tools available to you. Like, for
Yeah.
example, would you not use Google search even though it was available?
That's a perfect example.
Would you go try and find websites? No, right? That's
Right.
exactly what it is.
Right. Oh no, this is like well put. I think this was really nice. Next question. So we were talking about AI. We already know both cloud and AI both are very robust fields, right?
Yeah.
They both offer really promising careers. But is it going to be same 5 years, 10 years down the line, or would there be other tech trends that would become stronger? And how could I start preparing to be a leader 5 years, 10 years down the line?
Great question. I think we should separate that
Yeah.
the cloud and AI, because it's not I think it's not a versus question, right? I think it's more like AI is going to be part of every single thing. So cloud, I personally think with the growth of AI, cloud will grow even
Absolutely.
further, right?
Yeah, you
Because
can't build a system just with AI. You need
exactly.
services
You
to
need
power it.
services to
Yeah.
power it. So if you are great at cloud, you build your skill set in cloud, whether it's networking, databases, compute, any of the areas of cloud, you are you you will have good jobs,
Yeah.
right? Because cloud is always going to expand as AI is expanding.
Right.
As far as AI is concerned, I think every single person should think about AI as is two faceted thing. One is you have to be a user of AI, whatever your job is. You have to
Yeah.
use AI so that you become more efficient and productive in whatever you do. And the second aspect is, do you actually want to be the person who builds AI models and infrastructure? And that requires a little bit of, and you don't have to, but if you want to, that is a stream that's going to obviously expand, right? You
Of
need
course.
machine learning engineers, you need AI engineers,
Right.
but every single developer, if I'm talking to specifically developers, right, every single developer doesn't have to be a machine learning model creator, right? But
Right.
every single developer has to be an AI application creator or
Okay.
developer, right?
Okay, that's
and
interesting.
and that's and wrap your head around that, right? Because you're a developer, you can code, you need to know how to consume a model in your application. That you every single developer should know.
Need to know, right?
Yes.
Right.
So if you're learning today and you're like, okay, I should get into AI and I can develop applications, or I'm a front end designer, or I'm a back end code developer, you need to know how to use these models in your application
Right.
to
Right.
serve whatever the end user use case might be. Now, second aspect of this is you could also decide to be a machine learning AI engineer, and that means that you want to really now get into like model creation and
Right.
infrastructure to scale those models, machine learning operations, and that side of the world. So it's, you choose what you want to do, but as a developer you can't get away from being able to build,
And incorporate,
consume and
yeah,
incorporate the APIs for the
AI
models.
models. Yeah, I think the first part, the incorporation of AI models, that also makes sure that you increase the fungibility of a developer, right?
Exactly.
Because you could exist without knowing it today, but 5 years down the line, there's
Yeah,
nothing, probably nothing getting built without an AI model. So
exactly.
that's interesting. I think I now want to talk about my favorite part. So, as I was preparing for this interview, I went through your website and content. So, you've recently built two personal branding assets, right? So, I want to understand from you, why do you think personal branding is important for someone in tech, and what impact does it have on an average career trajectory?
Great question. I am a huge believer in personal branding, and I think it does wonders for you in career.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I didn't intend to work on personal branding,
Mm-hmm.
but I started to see value of that very quickly, and I was like, I need to work on this extensively. So that's kind of my answer. And there are two aspects to this, right? Personal branding helps you internal and external personal branding, and not everybody has to like post things on social
Sure.
media to have personal brand. But so I look at personal branding in two ways: internal and external. So internal could be how is your brand internally with your current peers,
Colleagues,
your
yeah.
colleagues, your the company that you work at. So working on that looks a little different than your external brand. And external brand could be the examples of like what you've seen on my work, right? And they are, yes, they are interconnected in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
but the internal brand can help you get promoted, can help you, like if you work very nicely on it,
Right.
it can help you build a case for like, oh, I'm this is my value, this is what I bring to the table. It can help your manager. A lot of times I hear from people when they tell me that, oh, my manager says I need more visibility, and
Yeah.
that's when I can get promoted. it's not always the manager's job to be able to find you visibility. It's also a little bit of your job to find
I
yourself the
think it's yours
visibility.
before your managers.
Exactly, right? So that's what I mean by that internal brand, where it's like my manager, I'm making my manager's job easy by making sure that people above him know me for my work,
Right, right.
right? And it then it becomes a very easy conversation for him to say, oh, Priyanka should be promoted. And they're like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
because I know what she's been doing, or her project, or whatever,
right,
right?
right.
And all of this also boils down to like the communication skills, which is why the this entire conversation have been focusing on the fact that just developing is not important, and the other aspects of your personality
Is very
also
important too.
come into
Yeah.
play when you're getting into so the external part is where you really want to come across as a thought leader, right? And that's a decision I've made for myself, that I want to come
Right,
across as a thought leader.
right,
That you could in cloud and AI.
right.
There are people who are thought leaders in other things that
All
you're
different
great at, right? All
categories. Yeah.
different categories, and you pick and choose what you want to be, and then you start writing not just want to be, but are also great at, and you have skill set in it, or you've studied that
Yeah.
very extensively, and now you want to share that with the world,
Right,
right?
right, right.
So those are the two ways in which I slice and dice it, but and the way you approach it can be a little different depending on what your goals are.
Right, absolutely. I think we could just talk about this topic for hours and hours,
Yes.
but two things before I move on. The internal one. I think everyone has to do personal branding whether or not they like it. And I've seen, I don't know, I may be generalizing it, but I've seen like mostly developers who are really great do not like it, right?
Yeah.
But um all said and done, I think this is the something everyone has to focus on.
Yeah.
But for external, as you said, that your expertise could be in that area, but there's also a lot of people I've seen are trying and they're evolve and find it out in the process of like just start creating posts and talk about
Yep.
something, and then they evolve and then they find out what they really want to talk about.
Yeah.
And that I think ties back to your internal personal branding a lot, because I think in the beginning it's a little bit rough and then you figure out as you go.
Exactly. And a large part of personal branding is figuring out as you go.
Yeah.
You don't like quite know what you want to, and which is why every time I mentor people for personal branding and have one-on-ones with for personal branding, I always ask them to dig deep and find what they're passionate about, and then just start putting something out, just start writing
Right.
something, just start having posts on those topics, and then over time you realize, okay, this is not sticking, or it's sticking but with this kind of audience, let me tweak that a little bit, and my next post is a little bit tweaked, right?
Yeah.
And then so over time you get there, and it's also a very patience driven
I was
process.
just about to come to that. And I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
patience driven in the sense that you will most likely not see followers or likes for like the first few things you do, and it can be demoralizing, demotivating, right? But it's also a consistency driven process. If
Right.
you consistently keep at it and forget, like, again, things I tell everybody I mentor on this is, don't look at the views and the likes, especially early on. That is the thing we do only after 6-8 months of consistency. Because people don't know you. They are not going to want to read your stuff until they really start relating with you. And
Yeah.
nobody relates with you when you meet them for the first time.
Right. Like
You build a relationship over
over
time. You get
time.
to know them. You get to, and by getting to know them, I mean, when they read your post, they learn about how you think, how you write, and then next time they come, they read your thing accidentally, they learn a little more about you, a little
Yeah.
more, and then they start following you. They don't
Yeah.
just follow you in like one or two posts, right?
Right.
So it's a very patience driven process, and you have to just give yourself the time and energy to like not worry about followers and likes, and just worry about, I want to create some amazing
Yeah.
stuff
Experiment stuff.
and experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That resonated really well with me. And I'm sure it's going to resonate with a lot of people out there. Okay. I mean, we also want a few tips from you on, how could, like, what are some very easy things I could do today to improve my overall personal branding, both internal, external, I think we have already covered, but internally.
Yeah. Being, I think internally, what works really well is try and get a little uncomfortable with, like, okay, I want to set up a meeting with the person 2 levels up. How many people do that? Don't do that. It's like 95% of the people don't have relationship with 2 levels up.
Right. Right.
I think that's insane.
Yeah.
Find a way, and most people want to talk to you. So it's just a matter of you have not tried.
Right. You've
Right,
not asked for
you've
it.
not asked for it. And that's not just for like 2 levels up, for like people who in other parts of the business, other areas that you'd have less exposure to, and just having a coffee chat, it opens up your mind so much. And for personal branding especially, strategic coffee chats
Yeah.
is the way to go, right? Strategically talking to somebody who might at some point be in the panel that will approve your project, or
Right.
be in the panel that will fund your idea, or be in the panel that will promote you, right? Strategically finding those people and finding time with them, requesting time with them to express your idea, make them your sponsor before you get to a point where you're asking for funding,
Right.
or before you get to a point where they are approving your promo, right? You don't want to be doing it at that point because that's too late.
Of
You want
course.
to be doing it a year before then, where you're like, hey, I have this idea and I was wondering what you think about it. And I have not found anybody who has declined a meeting.
Yeah. It's very hard to find that.
It's very hard to find. It's just that you never asked, right?
Right.
So that's what I would say for personal branding. Just making sure and
Go out and
go
talk.
out and talk and make sure you are fully prepared for that
Absolutely.
conversation,
You
right?
don't want to
You
waste those
exactly
really
you
precious
they
time.
gave you
Yeah.
some time. You want to be so respectful of that time that you come up with something so amazing that they want to have another meeting with you few months from now,
Right. Or
right?
they just remember you.
Or they remember you in ways that like, oh my god, that was such an amazing impression, right?
Right.
You want to be in their minds.
Right.
So yeah, that is my tip for personal
Right.
branding. Yeah.
Most of the times it's just a very little mental shift.
Yeah.
Like it's okay for me to ask for the time, and that that
Yeah.
is the wonderful thing you could do for yourself.
Yeah. And the
So
most that can happen is they'll say no, and that's fine,
yeah,
right? And you were anyways not having that meeting, so
yeah,
no is fine.
yeah. Just take yourself a little bit lightly. Go out and ask. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. I think now I want to talk about the book that you've written, your bestseller, Visualizing Google Cloud. I want to talk about the book, but I also want to talk about like throughout your writing process, you must have learned a couple of things which we can take back and embed in our day to day communications that we do in the work or just our storytelling aspect of it. So, would love to hear about that.
Okay, so the book is an interesting one because I was not intending to write a book. Most of the book was halfway through, was done in blogs
Oh, okay.
before I decided I should convert this into a book. And this is how that happened. I just was during COVID, and I was just thinking of different ways to reach developers, and I over a weekend I drew a sketch of how to use compute in cloud,
Okay.
and then I did a few more and wrote them as blogs, and the image was in the blog, and started to see hundreds of thousands of people, like kind of virality effect on these blogs.
Nice, nice.
And then I created a GitHub repo that also started to get thousands of stars and forks,
Yeah.
and it started to show that people are liking this
Finding it
stuff, right?
helpful.
Finding it helpful, and I got messages on LinkedIn and all that, and it was all relating to the fact that, oh, this is helping us get to prepare for certifications or interviews and things like that. So over, like, when I'd already had about 30 or some sketches in the GitHub repo, people were like, oh, we want to create PDFs. And I received a few requests that were like, oh, is it okay if we create PDFs so that it's sort of like a book?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, that's such a great idea. Maybe I should actually ask a publisher to help with converting these into a book. And yeah, so again, the book process usually is like you submit a manuscript, and then they approve and all that with the publishers. This was the other way around. When I reached out to the publishers, they were like, yeah, no manuscript needed. This is already proof that
Oh,
this is a
nice.
great content, right?
Mhm.
So that, and we just converted, like started converting from there to like the rest of the sketches that I had in mind I wanted to do
Mhm.
were then became part of it. But it was
Mhm.
a 1.5 year process. And the tip that you were asking about, like, it's just again patience, because I'm very passionate about like storytelling and teaching and all that, but even your passions can sort of start to worn you down,
Hmm. Yeah.
especially when it is like, okay, now I need to get through the rest of it, I need to finish it. Like,
Hmm.
you can't take a
Yeah.
break from it because you've committed that this will be a book.
Constant pressure.
Constant pressure.
Mhm.
So anyway, like I would say that, if you are writing a book, you will have moments where it's like, oh my god, when does this end?
I think
But
it
yeah.
just happens in like on day-to-day basis. If you're just creating any content generally, there
Yeah.
comes a point where like you feel really overwhelmed and like I don't have any ideas to create anything now. So
Yeah,
these things
exactly. You
happen.
could give yourself a break and then
Hmm.
bounce back and do it, is kind of what I would say. But yeah, like I think there was a question in there
Yeah,
about
it was
technical storytelling.
basically wanting to understand it because I think storytelling is really important part of even tech
Yeah.
communications. So how do you any tips like for us to better our game in storytelling?
Yeah. I think I always look at anything that I'm reading, if it's anybody's blog or anybody's video, or reading a paper or reading documentation, which is most of us have to do to
Yeah.
implement something, right? I I always I think in visually, and most people do actually. I think research shows that most people think visually. So I'm always taking the words and trying to figure out how they map from one to another, and try to do either a flow chart or
Yeah.
where does the journey go from here to there,
Easy
like
to digest.
easy to digest. Like, I'm either looking for a way to say, okay, step one, step two, step three, what are those steps? Sometimes there are no steps. Sometimes it's like, okay, everything converges, and here are the 5 ways in which you do a thing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm always looking, as I'm reading or digesting any piece of information, I'm always looking for those patterns.
All right.
How is one thing relating to the other? Is it bullet points? Is it things that
Flowchart,
flow charts? Is it, just
Venn
is it a
diagram, anything.
story or
Yeah.
that goes from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then when 5 happens you go back to 2? Like, whatever it is, I'm constantly looking for those patterns. And then when I'm explaining it, and this is where you can make your own versions, right? Like, where you're reading or getting your information, it might be a Venn diagram or a flow chart, but your interpretation of that could be a story where a character is going from here to there,
Correct.
right? And you could incorporate what you saw as a Venn diagram or a flow chart in the form of
Right.
a
Create a flow out
a
of it.
flow out of it
Yeah.
that's your own, right? So that's mostly what I'm doing. And then I also try to structure it in, and this sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, depending on what you're working with. What, why, how. If you
Yeah.
can answer some of that and then
Right.
put it back together
FAQs.
into
Yeah.
a flow diagram in some ways, then that works as well in some cases. But yeah.
Yeah, wonderful suggestions. I'd share what I find helpful, and you correct me if I'm wrong. So the other day I was just in a call where I was talking to a product manager. I wanted to sell my idea, so I basically start with an anecdote, which is my personal.
Yeah.
Like, I was trying to use this product, and this is where I got stuck, and this is where I think I would have leveraged it, and I would found it useful. And then I start like, this is my idea, I think this is how it would solve my problem,
Yeah.
and people around my community would use it, and
Yeah.
then I think that just builds the structure.
That is perfect. Like,
Yeah.
example with like your personal
Anecdote.
example,
Yeah.
anecdote, or somebody else's example are like perfect ways. I use that
Yeah.
all the time because examples just solidify
Yeah.
whatever especially in
Simplify
tech.
the
Yeah.
concept
And
basically.
especially in like tech space, right? You can't really explain an API.
Yeah.
But if you but if you can do that with some sort
Real
of a
life
flow, a
example.
real
Yeah.
life example, then it starts to make suddenly a lot more sense. So yeah, perfect
And
example.
attention is so challenging. You have to grab really the attention. Listen, what I'm saying is interesting to you as well.
Exactly, exactly.
So yeah. That brings us to the end of the podcast. It was very insightful for me. I really want to thank you. And before we wrap up, I just want to ask you, what are the thoughts you want to leave our audience with?
Thank you so much for having me as well. I think I always will say, I know not everybody is lucky to have found their passion,
Mm-hmm.
but everybody should try to.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are on the hunt to find your passion, you will get it
Yeah.
someday. And then when you do, you will start to find that dream job that you enjoy and love doing. And
Right.
when you do that, it's that intersection of what I love doing and what I love doing actually gets paid, and like it becomes very happy moment. So if you haven't found your passion, continue to stay at it and find it, because
Patiently.
yeah, patiently, exactly.
Thank you so much. Really, I'm so glad you joined me today for this conversation. I've already gone through your content, but I still found this conversation really helpful.
Thank you.
So, really, thank you for this. Thank you for watching, and make sure that you connect with Priyanka and follow Bit Spots and Bosses. All the links are available in description, so please go ahead and check that out. And also, please stay tuned because we have a lot of good content planned for you, which will be available in upcoming episodes. Thank you.